Neil Warnock became Queen's Park Rangers' 7th manager in just a year and a half, but on the day of his first meeting with the team, something remarkable happened. As Warnock himself recalled, it was unbearably hot, and suddenly he noticed a lad in thick woolen gloves. "Who's that?" he asked someone from the staff. "That's Taarabt. Better not go near him. He's useless," was the reply. But Warnock started watching him and saw something he had never seen before. Yes, Taarabt constantly lost the ball trying to dribble past opponents in his own half, but this young man was intriguing. It was sheer audacity. Warnock took him aside and said, "Listen, Adel, I'm going to play you on Saturday. If you play poorly, I'll give you another chance in the next game. And if you play poorly again, I'll keep playing you because you are going to save us." About a year later, Queen's Park Rangers were at the top of the league table. Taarabt, who had just turned 22, had scored 19 goals and provided 21 assists, playing as a midfielder. The entire country fell in love with him. But why was everyone so afraid of him? Taarabt was like a wild stallion. In another era, he would have been called a virtuoso. But in an age where coaches are obsessed with turning every player into a programmed robot, they tried to break him. And those who tried to tame him, he would metaphorically kick in the face. Everything he knew, he learned from the streets. At just 17, he was being called the new Zidane and compared to Ronaldinho. Just think, he had only played 3 minutes in League One, and his first club was already flooded with offers and had to sell him. Arsenal immediately took notice, but then scout Damien Comolli moved to Tottenham and convinced the young man to join them instead. In his debut, coming on for the last 3 minutes of the match and managing to turn the game around, he earned praise from Martin Jol, but Taarabt himself didn't feel too good. "The best advice I could have given my younger self was to stay in France. They valued me there. They protected me. In England, it was different. You get signed and are immediately left alone. I would train for an hour or two, and then I was on my own," he recalled. Harry Redknapp took over the team, and though he promised Adel playing time many times, those promises remained just words. And when they finally parted ways, Harry Redknapp almost predicted his future. "He's one of those players I'm always afraid to let go of because I know one day he'll come back and become my nightmare." It was then that Taarabt found himself on loan at Queen's Park Rangers, and in only his second start, he scored a goal that was voted the best of the season. However, every one of his games was a real roller coaster. Worse, he loved to talk too much. At one point, he even said he regretted not joining Arsenal while he was still under contract with Tottenham. Fortunately, that was when Neil Warnock took over the team. Otherwise, who knows what else Adel would have managed to say, but their meeting was like love at first sight. 2 goals and 5 assists in his first 7 matches under Warnock. By the end of the season, a spot in the team of the year. And while a few months earlier he was dreaming of a move to a top club in Spain, now he was saying, "QPR is home. I want to take this team to the Premier League." The manager secured a permanent transfer for Taarabt for just £1 million and, against all logic, made the 22-year-old rebel the team captain. After 10 matches, he already had 13 goal contributions, and when Swansea tried to catch QPR in the table, Taarabt delivered one of the best performances of his career. The score was 4-0 to QPR, and he was involved in all the goals. The first, he dribbled past 4 opponents and made an assist. The second, he won a penalty after a crazy run. The third, he scored from an impossible angle. The fourth, simply a masterpiece, one of the best goals of all time. At the end of the season, Adel started to lose his head again. First, he impulsively retired from the national team, simply leaving the camp after learning he would be on the bench. Then, a series of absurd stories followed. Before a match against Burnley, Taarabt approached Warnock and asked for a week off, claiming his cousin was in critical condition after a gunshot wound. Of course, the manager agreed, but on the eve of the game, they found his passport in the dressing room. It became clear he wasn't planning on going anywhere. What does Warnock do? He assigns him a security detail to make sure he doesn't even think about skipping the match. And so, on game day, Taarabt comes up to the manager and innocently asks, "So, how was your weekend?" To which Warnock replies, "Terrible, Adel, just terrible. By the way, here's your passport." Taarabt turned red, started to fidget, and the manager added, "I don't even want to know what you were doing. Look at me. You will go out on that pitch and score a goal, or I will tear you apart." In the very first minute, Taarabt opened the scoring, but of course, he didn't learn his lesson. A month later, with the title already secured, there was one last match of the season against Leicester, and Taarabt simply didn't show up. This time, he was actually in France with his family. When Warnock called in a panic, Adel calmly said, "I've already won you the league. My job is done." The problem was, he was the captain. who the hell was going to lift the trophy if he wasn't even in the country? In the end, the club organized a special operation, and by the middle of the first half, Taarabt walked into the stadium to do what he had to do, lift the cup. For the next 7 months, Taarabt openly showed that he didn't care about the club. Once, when the team was losing 3-0 at halftime, he was substituted and simply left the stadium. Half an hour later, he was seen at a nearby pub watching the match with fans and taking selfies with them. And as you might guess, with that attitude, his adaptation to the Premier League was going horribly. In 7 months, just 1 goal contribution. Even Warnock gave up and said, "If PSG really offers £20 million for him, I'll personally drive him to Paris." But the funniest part was yet to come. With a month left in the season, even Taarabt seemed to get tired of his own sabotage and suddenly started playing again, shining particularly brightly in the big matches. It was he who carried that hopeless QPR to victories over Arsenal, Liverpool, and Tottenham, literally saving the team from relegation. The following season, QPR managed their first win only in December. The team was relegated anyway, and of course, there was no chance Taarabt would agree to return to the second division. He immediately fled on loan to Fulham to his former coach, Martin Jol. But just when it seemed like a dead end in his career, 6 months later, Taarabt surprised everyone and went on loan to AC Milan. And for a moment, it really seemed like his chance. Taarabt held his own alongside Robinho and Balotelli. He fit perfectly into that team and managed to convince everyone. But as he himself later said, "We were on the verge of signing a permanent deal, but QPR started demanding crazy things. And then Filippo Inzaghi came in and said he didn't want to deal with it." In the end, Taarabt had to return to QPR, and the transition from playing alongside Milan stars to playing with Bobby Zamora proved too painful for him. But as it had to happen, QPR finally terminated his contract, and don't think that was the end. At that point, he was only 26 years old. Just a few hours later, Benfica announced his signing. A month into the season, he was caught in a nightclub the night before a match. He hadn't even made his debut, and Benfica was already thinking about getting rid of him. Taarabt was sent to the reserves and wasn't called up to the first team for 1,387 days. He gave a scandalous interview, doing everything to provoke a reaction. It was only in his second season that he was finally sent on loan to Genoa. Ivan Juric, the head coach, set himself a single goal: to turn Taarabt's despair into a desire to get back in shape. And after a year and a half of real shock therapy, Taarabt lost 11 kilograms and became a completely different person. John Vertonghen said he didn't recognize him. Rui Costa called it the most impressive transformation he had ever seen in football. But nothing is more striking than the words of Taarabt himself. "I went through hell, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Now I am calm, I spend more time with my family. I am a true professional. I changed my diet, my sleep, my training. I realized I could be better. I changed my life." Today, Taarabt is 36 years old and is finishing his career in the UAE Pro League. And that's his story.